So Lauren's main areas of research are disaster ethics, playful learning, and interdisciplinarity. And her presentation today sits at the intersection of those three fields. So as part of today's Legend Hangout, Lauren will provide background to the development of her game, Disaster Ethics, and, time permitting, will facilitate a quick play of part of the game. Disaster ethics is a newish and niche discipline within disaster and crisis management, which aims to integrate ethics into disaster preparedness, response, recovery, and resilience. Disaster response and recovery is, importantly, interdisciplinary. To that end, Lauren's game demonstrates interdisciplinary decision-making and shows how a decision by one group or profession affects the choices available to other professions. So, without further ado, Lauren, please take it away.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. I love talking about disaster ethics. It's kind of a baby, so I'll get overly passionate and then ask all your questions, and I will answer with as much passion, hopefully. So disaster ethics, the thing that I just need to draw your attention to is this is all made possible by funding from PRIME, the Principles for Responsible Management Education. So a little bit of background on the gap. When we say ethics, what do we actually mean? I know that legal ethics are not required on any law program. I know that it is a component of the SQE, but I don't think that we actually talk about what do we mean when we say ethics? What is that should? It's based in our own professional understanding of, well, these are our codes of conduct, or these are our codes of ethics. And so disaster ethics and the gap that I'm trying to fix is kind of like, well, what do we all mean by that? Not just lawyers, but also government officials, nurses, bin men, food delivery people. What is it that we mean by ethics? And do we all have the same understanding, or at least the same grounding, same general idea of what we mean and what we should do, ethically speaking? And then when we take it from all these different professional perspectives, how is everybody using it differently? So if we have a lawyer and a postman, and they say they're both using ethics and they both understand ethics to be the same thing, are they going to come to the same decisions on what should be happening as they go about their day-to-day in a disaster scenario? So I guess it's not their day-to-day, but rather like as they go about their operating within an emergency situation, are we all aligned? Are we walking in the same direction? Or are we actually working at odds with each other? So those are the kind of things that I'm investigating as part of a larger disaster ethics project. And I'm hoping that you see how it's interdisciplinary, how legal ethics and the ethics of legal professionals will fit into this, but how this is not based on the legal profession. It's very, very much an interdisciplinary project. So what I respond and how I come to this idea is to start with, okay, well, let's start with what is disaster ethics, and let's go with a common definition. I'll say it's an umbrella applied ethics, which integrates and accounts for ethics at the preparedness, response, recovery, and resilience phase of any crisis or disaster. So just like medical ethics or legal ethics, those are all different types of applied ethics. Well, I say disaster ethics is going to come over that and account for all of those different professional ethics within a crisis or disaster situation. It's always important to remember that preparedness is the most important place to get things right when it comes to ethics. And as I've been stressing already, it is interdisciplinary, just as a disaster response is. You know, we can't just have a government official responding to a disaster. No, they need medical professionals, business owners, food, the general public. You need to think about all of those different disciplines and roles. So what I've developed, I call disaster ethics, because why be any more creative than that? Excuse me. So it is a local multiplayer, virtual decision-making game. If any of you, I like talking to people that are roughly my age. If you remember back to the movie Big, and the young Tom Hanks is playing a game where it says, you know, do I throw the fire sword at the monster in the cavern? Yes, throw that sword. the sword missed. So that's the kind of game that this disaster ethics game is. It's about making decisions as questions come up and trying to move the game forward and move the situation forward. The difference between that and what I do and how I'm using this kind of a game and facility is that I'm an advocate of playful learning as opposed to gamification. Yes, I know this is a game, but I use a playful learning pedagogy. And by that, I mean that there's no winner or loser. That I don't think that having a winner or loser is actually relevant or important. It's about the process. And so as we go through this, and hopefully we'll have a chance to play a little bit, as we go through this, remember that it's not about winning. It's about understanding how we are in the situation that we're in, what choices we're making, why we're making those choices, ethically speaking, and then seeing if we come to an ethical result. But it's all together. So we're not playing against each other. The outcome is kind of ongoing. We don't know what's going to happen at the end. Think about the pandemic. We don't actually know if it's over. We don't know what our outcome is. So we just have to keep making ethical decisions as we go. Developing this disaster ethics game, as I told you, a child of the 1980s and playing and watching the movie Big. But my research and professional interest is in disaster response. So I worked for a while for the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. And so that's where my professional interest came. And then as I came back into academia, I kind of kept that disaster response. So you can start to see that interdisciplinary, the practically inspired. And the more I got into disaster literature, I have a PhD in global ethics. And so a PhD in global ethics, working on disaster stuff, you start going, hey, there's no disaster ethics materials out there. And so that's kind of where I am, is trying to develop disaster ethics materials and a disaster ethics movement. Excuse me. As I said at the beginning, the disaster ethics game is a result of a prime seed funding. It was £1,000 and I hired a developer. I do not do the techie side of this. It's all my ideas and my storyline and all of my approvals and stuff. But my developer was crucial in putting all this all together and telling me what was realistic and what was going to work and what wasn't going to work, and understanding like a game's philosophy underneath things. So if you're thinking about developing any games, I highly recommend finding developers who you can trust, who sync with you, and they might not be the most bells and whistles and all the bows, because I looked into like the fancy developers. But my developer is somebody who's doing this freelance, who is looking to start doing this kind of work. And so there's a lot more flexibility, and that worked for me. So find a developer that works for you, and I think the product is a lot better. Through the development of disaster ethics, I realized and decided with my developer that the actual game needed to work at the intersection of disasters, the Sustainable Development Goals, ethics, consideration of professional ethics. So as we play a little bit, you're going to see that there's 4 different professions covered in the game. I only had £1,000, so I'm really proud of 4 professions being covered. But how one person's decision impacts the number of choices that somebody else will have in making their decisions. So that's really important from a decision making. But the point that I do is they all have to be ethically based. And so if somebody makes a decision based on a utilitarian, or all about the consequences, well, then the options that you are limited to, even if you're not a utilitarian, they change, they shift with who made decisions before you and in what context. Sorry, talking too much actually just ruins my voice lately. The game hopefully looks at critical analysis. It's a chance for argumentation, discussion, decision. This is a facilitated game as opposed to a game that I let students go off and do. It's something that you offer a question, offer a scenario, and then kind of let classes debate, discuss, vote, put up their position for, and then vote again, and then that's how you proceed. So it's about engaging with people's reasons for disagreeing with you, how much you can bring people over to your side, making decisions, and it's the kind of critical analysis and decision making that we would hope happens during a disaster, but we don't have time for. So again, this critical analysis is really crucial because it's creating an environment that people get to work through all of these decisions and work through the ethics so that when they're actually in a crisis, they understand the thought process that went into that. And hopefully it is fun for everyone. For the developer side, I include some techie bits for those of you who are really interested in that side. We were originally going to use Twine. It was something that I was familiar with and understood, but that was scrapped because of my developer's lack of expertise in it, and I wasn't about to try to figure out how to do it. So I was like, sure, whatever works for you. So instead it was made with RenPy, which is the visual novel engine. And they worked with all the coding language of Python. It is free, open access, and easy to use. It is uploaded to itch.io, and so right now you all could search for it, download it either on a Mac or PC, and it uses decision-making processes and player input to determine an outcome. Making it user-friendly, again, my developer was crucial in telling me what I needed to do. And they said, look, you need a game tutorial in addition to that teacher's manual. I thought like a teacher, and my developer thought like a game developer and said, you need a game tutorial. You need to give them step-by-steps on how to download, when to download, where to click, what all the screens mean. And so again, I'm grateful for that cooperation, that partnership. So again, we're coming back to this game. Let me look at my time. I think I've only used 10 minutes. So what I thought I would do, I'm going to try to get out of this, and you should still see me. Good. We have 10 minutes, and so I thought we might play a little bit of the game just to give you an example of it. It's opening. I have it downloaded on my computer. Bear with, it takes a little while. There we go. Okay, so I can come back to you, share. Here we go. Ta-da! Here we are. Let's start the game. So I start off with this scenario, and the scenario is something I created, and I wanted it to be as neutral as possible. So I made up a country, just understanding how different disasters affect different countries. If you could have a little bit of a read, because my voice will go. So have a little quick read. I'm going to skip through quite quickly. You don't need all of the information because we're only going to get through one little choice or one decision making. So a population of 3.5 million, tourism and fishing, as you'd expect, climate change, of course. We're going to start in a little coastal town, and a 7.2 under ocean earthquake hit at 5:38 a.m. on Tuesday morning, triggered a tsunami. 6:02 a.m. the tsunami alert alarms went off, triggering a mass evacuation of coastal homes. Still morning, few people are outside their homes, but of course the fishermen had already left. Excuse me. So it's now Monday, the week after the tsunami. Pratiti, the town that we're talking about, has been responding to the emergency for 4 days. The tsunami death toll is low, but there is still a death toll. The town has been operating with a travel ban, only emergency and necessary vehicles for the moment. The president has offered Samadi all assistance that it might need as it recovers from the tsunami. The cell tower was washed away, and so town-based customers are relying on poor, overloaded mobile phone service coming via nearby towers. So it's a bit of information that you need to understand. It's also the limited information that you might be getting in the first few hours and first few days of a disaster. Hopefully by day 4, you understand, you have a bit more communication, but I wanted to mimic that, well, this is all the information you have. We don't have extra information at this point. Now, we begin our disaster management ethical decision-making from the perspective of the mayor. My developer also did all the artwork. So this is a completely self-contained within copyright and stuff, which is really, really nice that I can promote it however I want, and I don't have to worry about different intellectual property issues. So, so we're going to start with the perspective of the mayor. And as mayor, you instigated a travel ban in Pratiti. We learned that in the slide before. You wanted to give the emergency responders some time to respond, assess the situation, decide the best path forward. There's still much recovery to achieve, but now you're being asked to lift the ban. What will you do? So I'm going to return to the group now. You have 2 choices. Could you tell me lift the ban, maybe put it in the chat, lift the ban or keep the ban? You just put what you're thinking into the chat. Lift the ban, thank you. Good, good, good. Okay, so a fairly even number between keep and lift. Isn't that interesting? A fairly even number, but I think there's a couple more keep, or at least one more keep. So I'm going to say that you all are deciding on keep. Can I ask why? Anybody who said keep, can I? You're in the majority, but can I ask why you said keep the ban? Keep the roads free for emergency services. Thank you, Rebecca. So you're saying, look, I know people want to get out and about. I know that there's a lot of people that are probably complaining, but the emergency services have to take priority. Cool. Now, from a legal perspective, I'm sure that there's not a concern here, right? Because during lockdown situations, during quarantining situations, the governments, most internationally, most governments have like wide-ranging capabilities of restricting people's movement in order to maintain peace and to make sure that everybody is safe. But by keeping the roads free for emergency services, we are limiting the amount of business that can keep going on. Now, that's cool if that's where you want to be, but you can understand why the lift the ban, might want to say something else. But we might also see why some people might say lift the ban because, look, I got to get to family. I have to go see if people are okay. Now, the question that I would ask the class at this point is, if it's keep the ban or lift the ban, what's driving that? What kind of principle is driving that? So you're saying keep the roads free for emergency services. Great. But is that about maximizing the number of lives we save? Is that about saying that we have a duty to society that trumps anybody else's wishes about anything else? Does that mean that we have an obligation to save people before we have an obligation to reopen businesses? And so when we're talking about disaster ethics, we kind of want to understand which one of those we're actually talking about. And if everybody's not on the same page, that's kind of going to cause divergence later on when we make other choices. I'm just showing you how the facilitation will go on. So let's say keep the ban. You've decided to keep the ban for 2 weeks. And as I was just explaining to you, this might have been made based on a utilitarian viewpoint, which is all about the consequences, maximizing the number of people saved, or a deontological one saying about our duties and our obligations. And it's really important for us to unpack which one of those we actually meant and why, and seeing how other people in the same scenario were also thinking about it. The reason that I think that this is so important, and one of the things that I am going to start stressing as I work with professionals with this game, is that if those people in your institution are not using the same, even if they're not using the same theory, but if they're not looking at who's prioritized and why, you're never going to be able to understand the ethical decision making of your managers, but that also means that you're also not going to be consistent in how you ethically respond to something. So if, this office within our university says, well, it's about maximizing lives saved, and this office within the university says, oh, it's about our duty and our responsibilities, well, when one has to come in conflict with the other, how do we know what decisions to make? How do we know that we're consistent in our ethics? How do we know that we're not going to undermine judicially? Yeah, lovely, right? And I'm so glad to talk to lawyers about this, because it's one of those that you go, well, there's this other side of it, and we have to make sure that this is legal. But I actually don't care if it's legal. I care if it's ethical. And then we'll figure out the laws as a result of that, or we'll see how the laws work as a result. The one of the professions that I don't have here, you'll see the next one is head teacher. One of the professions I don't have is lawyer, and that's going to come in future iterations of the game. And I might have the lawyer do kind of injects every once in a while, because there's going to be a balancing act between, well, this isn't legal, but it is something that we should be doing. So do we change the laws, or do we rethink how we're applying the laws, or do we ignore what's ethical and just follow what's legal? And that usually never works. Oh, good. Red pie and twine for geography and disaster planning. Oh, let's talk later, Rich. Thank you. Let's talk later for disaster planning. So very quickly, one more minute I have. I hear. Nope. what should the head teacher do? So we've said that we're going to keep the road ban, but the head teacher is going, so how do my kids get to school? What am I supposed to do? Does the head teacher try to move teaching online, or wait for the travel ban to lift and then start teaching the students? So the travel ban is going to be on for another 2 weeks. Do we just move things online for those 2 weeks? Or do we just go, you know what, give the kids a rest for 2 weeks? I don't know if anybody wants to give me a little answer. First one, wait for 2. There we go. We're going with that. Wait for the travel ban. Start teaching. Schools can be open for food distribution and to offer mental health care. Now, what's really interesting for this, I talked to professionals about this question, and I talked to A-level students and then younger students, and they all had different answers. And it was really interesting that the students were saying, like, don't put us online. It's pointless to put us online for 2 weeks. And then the older students were like, get us right online. Let's start teaching. Let's start learning right away. And that's exactly it. So that's one of those pieces of information that people forget. Of course, the switch to online won't go that smoothly. But in addition to that, how many people have computers? We don't have any information on that. So how are we going to move people online if they don't have computers? And are we really going to do a turnaround of computers in 2 weeks? Maybe we had better preparedness and we did know all of this ahead of time, and we've lived through the global pandemic, but there might still be an inequality, 1 laptop for a family of 4 or something like that. So that's that. There's a lot more iterations and different avenues for things to go down. And if you had chosen to lift the ban instead of keep the ban, we go down a completely different route of questioning. That's that. I will turn it over to the next speaker or to our moderator, to Tim, but I look forward to your questions. Thank you.